It feels like you can't escape gambling these days, right? It's everywhere. And it's this really weird mix stretching from, your local community fundraiser all the way to these massive billion-dollar apps right there on your phone. I mean, think about it. On one hand, you've got something like Church Bingo. It feels totally harmless, right? It's not really about winning big money, it's more about getting together, having some fun, maybe raising a little cash for a good cause. It's gambling, technically, but it's all wrapped up in fellowship. And then you've got the total opposite end of the spectrum, the huge, state-sponsored lotteries. These are official government-run games. They're sold to us as this civic good, promising you this life-changing jackpot with just one little ticket. And of course, there's the new giant in the room, online sports betting. You literally can't watch a game without seeing an ad for it. They're just relentless, screaming about bonus bets and easy money, turning every single play into a chance to win or lose right from your couch. So you get this kind of cultural whiplash, right? From the church basement to these slick apps, and it leads to a pretty important question for a lot of folks. What's the official word here? What does the Catholic Church actually say about all this? Is gambling a sin or not? All right, so to figure this out, we have to go straight to the source. Let's look at the Church's core teaching on this. And no surprise here, like with a lot of big moral questions, the answer isn't a simple yes or no. The Church is all about nuance here. It's not so much about the act itself, it's about the why and the how. Okay, so the most important place to start is right here, in the official Catechism of the Catholic Church. And it says something really interesting. It says that games of chance, or wagers, are not in themselves contrary to justice. So, that's our starting point, our foundational principle. And that little phrase, not contrary to justice, that's everything. What it basically means is that gambling can be okay. It can be a totally acceptable form of fun, of recreation. It's not automatically evil. But, and this is a really, really big but, it's only okay if it meets some very strict conditions. So, what are those conditions? When does that harmless fun cross a line and become a real problem, morally speaking? Well, the Catechism is super clear about this. There are basically three major red flags. First, it's a sin if you're gambling with money you need for the basics. Rent, groceries, taking care of your family. Second, it crosses the line when it stops being a game and becomes what the Catechism calls an enslavement, what we call an addiction today. And third, it's a huge problem if the game itself is crooked, if there's cheating involved, or it's just plain unfair. A good way to think about it is like the Church's view on alcohol. For a lot of people, a glass of wine with dinner is totally fine, right? But for some, it can become a destructive force. It's the same idea here. On one side, you have recreation. It's for fun. You're using extra cash you can afford to lose, and the outcome is just a good time. But on the other side, you have addiction. The motive is desperation, chasing what you've lost. The money is what you need to live. And the outcome? Well, it's financial ruin and a whole lot of pain. Okay, so with those moral lines in mind, let's look at the modern multi-billion-dollar gambling industry. Because when you look closely, you start to wonder if their entire business model is built to push people right over those lines. And just look at these numbers. They're pretty shocking. The data shows that the modern gambling industry makes more than half of all its profits from just a tiny fraction, 5% of its players. And who are those players? They're the ones with the worst addictions. So this brings up a huge moral question, right? A question of justice. Can an industry be considered just if its profits depend on addiction? And let's be real, the whole system is designed for you to lose. That's the business model. Studies have found that fewer than 5%, less than 1 in 20 online sports bettors actually end up ahead in the long run. I mean, the math isn't complicated. For the house to win, almost everyone else has to lose. It's really just a massive transfer of wealth. And a lot of the time, it's flowing away from the people who need it the most. Because of all this, some Catholic thinkers have started calling these new online platforms something much harsher than entertainment. They're calling them consumer fraud schemes. The argument is pretty simple. Their main goal isn't fun. It's to use psychology and addiction to pull money out of people's pockets, especially from those who are most vulnerable. And this is where the conversation gets even bigger. Because the critique isn't just about individual choices anymore. It's about how this whole industry impacts society, what the Church calls the common good. And we have to ask about the government's role in all of this too. When you look at it from a Catholic social teaching perspective, there's this huge difference between how a society should fund itself. On one hand, you have taxes. The church sees that as a civic duty, right? A way we all chip in together to build our community. But then you have state lotteries. And the critique there is that it's the government kind of shirking its duty. Instead of asking for a shared contribution, it's dangling this fantasy of easy money, which actually weakens that sense of community.
So here's the bottom line. When the government runs a lottery, it's not just allowing a vice to exist, it's actively promoting it. It's putting its stamp of approval on it. And who ends up paying the price? Well, the research is crystal clear. Lotteries get most of their money from lower-income communities. They also send this really damaging message that the way to get ahead is just by getting lucky, not by working hard. And that kind of thinking, well, it really gets in the way of building a truly just and fair society for everyone.
So as we bring this all together, you can really see what the church is worried about. It's not just the money. It's the real cost, the spiritual cost, the social cost of living in a culture that's just soaked in gambling.
Pope Francis himself didn't mince words about this, especially with the boom in sports betting. He called it an addiction, and he said it's like putting your hand in the pocket of the people, especially the workers and the poor. And that's the key, really. The focus is always on the real-world damage this does to the people who can least afford to be hurt. So in the end, the church's whole teaching on gambling really brings us back to that fundamental question from the Gospels. In a world that is always shouting about instant jackpots and getting rich quick, it forces us to stop and ask, what really matters? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? What is the true price of that winning ticket?